You're listening to Huddle Up with Josh Kelski.
Hello everybody and welcome to my second episode of my new series, This Week in Florida Sports. I just want to take a quick second to thank all of you. My last episode was the most popular that I've ever had, and that was the first version of This Week in Florida Sports. So I'm going to keep this going every week because you guys seem to enjoy it. Let's start off with the Dolphins. The Dolphins have won their second game of the year and their second game in a row, even though the Colts are playing with their backup quarterback. Forget about their record. It doesn't matter. Here's a bold statement for all of you. The Dolphins aren't tanking. Can you believe it? The Dolphins aren't tanking. As much as the fan base believes that they are, they're wrong. They're 100% wrong. I wonder if tanking was an excuse for the fan base because they were consistently losing. Maybe a way to have hope for the future by getting Tua. And that brings me to another part of this story. The Tua issue. The fan base believed that if the Dolphins lost every game, they would get the first pick of the draft and get Alabama's star quarterback Tua. The fan base believed that they didn't have a quarterback. But it turns out that they do. And his name is Ryan Fitzpatrick. You're going to need to get used to that name because he's going to be with the Dolphins for the next few years. Well, I can admit that I believe that the Dolphins were tanking. But man, I was wrong. It's pretty clear that they aren't. So you shouldn't believe the fan base. You shouldn't believe that the Dolphins aren't tanking. They aren't. So don't use that as an excuse. The Dolphins lost 40-0. They're not tanking. At all. This season is a monumental one. Brian Flores was introduced as the head coach at the beginning of the year. He lost his first 7 games. Now, he did beat the Dolphins' biggest rival, the New York Jets. And now they beat the Colts, who still have a winning record. This win tells us that the Dolphins and Brian Flores are ready to win. Period. End of story. This team doesn't want to lose. The coaching staff doesn't want to lose. The head office, I hope to think that they don't want to lose, but I can't say that with certainty. Period. End of story. The Dolphins aren't tanking. Let's move on to the Florida Gators. The Gators defeated Vanderbilt 56-0 on Saturday. This was a terrific bounce back from last week's loss against the Georgia Bulldogs, which proved to be costly for their season. If they won that game, they most likely would have gone to the SEC Championship and faced what now is LSU for a rematch, but they fell short by 7 points. Last episode, I talked about that drop pass that was called a catch after review. I don't know how that happened, but the Gators lost by 7 points, and they don't have playoff hopes anymore. That's fine, though. The selection committee predicts that the Gators will play in the Cotton Bowl against Memphis. This is subject to change, and it will change, most likely. The Cotton Bowl rotates every year. Sometimes it could be a playoff game. Who knows? This is a big game. Memphis, great team. This is going to be what the Gators are going to play for the rest of this season. Let's move on to Gator basketball. They started the season as number 6 in the country. During their first game, they didn't disappoint by any stretch. They steamrolled North Florida 74-59 on Tuesday. Their next opponent was Florida State, their interstate rivals. The Gators fell to FSU 63-51 earlier today on Sunday. I wouldn't be shocked if the Gators fall out of the top 10. Wouldn't cross my mind. That was an embarrassing game. It's a shame to see them lose at this point in the season against an unranked team, and they just can't beat FSU. Don't know why, don't know how they didn't win. But they are going to face Towson on Thursday. Let's move on to Hurricanes football. Coming into this week, the University of Miami was 5-4. They needed one more win to go to a bowl game, and they got that win on Saturday, as they easily beat Louisville 52-27. The Hurricanes are predicted to play in the Sun Bowl against Arizona State. Big win just a few days ago. Now let's go to Hurricanes basketball. The unranked Hurricanes fell short to Louisville, who was number 5, to open up the season. But they answered back on Friday with a 74-60 win against FAU. The Canes put up 74 points in their first 2 games. That's not combined. That's 74 first game, 74 the second game. Moving on to the Florida Panthers. The Panthers played only 3 games this week. Their first was against the number 1 team in the league, the Washington Capitals. I actually went to the game. For a Thursday night, that crowd was ginormous. Huge turnout. It's nice to see, especially against the Capitals. And I saw on Twitter, it's only packed because they're Capital fans. No, it wasn't. Mostly Panthers fans. There were a few Caps fans, but that's with any sport. You're always going to have some opposing fans. It was Panthers, let's go Panthers, all game. It was loud. It was incredibly noisy. It was a happy atmosphere. Now that game was 4-4 going into overtime. So lots of goals both ways. Panthers did get the point, but they lost 5-4 in OT. Fun fact, during that game, there was a goal scored in the first minute of every period, including overtime. That's incredible. That shows you that both teams need to improve their first minute defense. You can't give up a goal in the first. It shouldn't happen. It really sets up the period, and normally in a negative way. This was one of only 4 regulation losses for the Panthers this year. But they did sneak out a win today on Sunday against the Rangers in a shootout in New York. The Cats, the game was up and down, going both ways. Each team scored 5 goals during regulation. So 10 total goals during the regulation period. Panthers now have 21 points and hold a wild card spot, even though they are tied with the Montreal Canadiens. Compared to the rest of the league, the Panthers are the 13th best team. They're tied with Vancouver, Montreal, Pittsburgh, and Nashville. So, technically the Panthers are tied for the 9th best team in the league. Obviously, the Panthers had a terrific start, especially the caliber of teams that they played. They played the best teams in the league. They have the hardest schedule of any team in the NHL to start the season. Right now, they are on track to have an over 100-point season, which normally will get you into the playoffs. So, as of right now, the Panthers are a clear playoff team. Something nice to say for the first time in a long time. Let's move on to the Miami Heat. After a fiery start for the Heat, they finally started to cool off. They racked up a 29-point win against the Houston Rockets, but fell to Denver just a few days later by a score of 109-89. Then they won one more game and fell to the Lakers by 15. The Heat's record stands as 6-3. They held the 3rd playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. Huge improvement from last year. Last year, they didn't make the playoffs. They were a few games short. Now, as of right now, they look to be a clear playoff team. It's nice to say finally in South Florida sports, that there are 2 playoff teams in 2 different leagues. The next 5 games for the Heat should be a breeze. All of those teams have lost more than half of their games this season. It would be nice to see the Heat pull at least 3 wins from this upcoming 5 games, and you should expect that. You should go into the attitude that we're going to win every game in this nice 5-game stretch. Who knows? They could be 11-3 by the end of this little stretch. So the Panthers, potential playoff team. The Heat, potential playoff team. No news really about the Marlins. Just owners' meetings are happening this week. So I thank you all for listening to the second episode of my new series, This Week in Florida Sports. We'll see you next time on Huddle Up.